In Brooklyn, they say a man's word is his bond, but in the old neighborhood, a man's silence is his survival. Alessia Russo, 26, served espresso to mobsters in Carroll Gardens while finishing a Ph.D. on dying American dialects. She spoke Old Brooklyn Italian, a coded language only 3 families still used. The kind her grandmother Gianna taught her between kneading dough and folding laundry back when the old woman's hands still remembered how to kill. On a Tuesday night in November, she overheard Nico Lavaro, youngest mafia boss in Red Hook, order an execution in the old tongue, a language his grandfather invented to hide from the FBI in the 60s. She understood every word. The espresso machine hissed its warning at Cafe Marcello, steam curling through air thick with cologne and unspoken threats. Alessia had worked here 3 months long enough to recognize the regulars, short enough to still notice when the atmosphere shifted from neighborhood joint to something far more dangerous. Tuesday nights were dead. 2 tables nursing cold cappuccinos, Paolo in the kitchen pretending not to hear anything worth remembering. Tonight every booth was full. Men in suits that cost more than her Columbia stipend sat with the stillness of predators. They didn't check phones, didn't glance at menus, just waited with hands folded on tables scarred by decades of similar conversations, similar choices that ended in unmarked graves or FBI witness protection. Paolo's voice came tight from the kitchen. "Table 7 needs water." The pitcher felt cold against her palm as she crossed the floor. Her reflection warped in the metal surface. Dark hair, pulled back apron, slightly crooked-looking, exactly like what she was a graduate student funding a dissertation nobody understood and even fewer people cared about. The preservation of regional American dialects in isolated urban communities. Thrilling stuff for the 3 professors who'd actually read her prospectus. Table 7 was the corner booth furthest from the door closest to the emergency exit that led to an alley where Paolo kept trash bins and broken dreams. 4 men. 3 blurred together in her memory, now interchangeable muscle wearing expensive fabric like armor. But the 4th made her hand shake just enough that water sloshed onto the tray. He sat with his back to the wall, dark eyes scanning the room with methodical precision, mapping exits, cataloging threats, the kind of awareness that came from growing up in a world where carelessness got you killed. His suit was charcoal, perfectly tailored, worn with the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned whether he belonged in expensive places. Black hair swept back from a face all sharp angles and controlled fury. Mid-40s maybe, though men like him aged differently. Violence either killed you young or hardened you into something timeless. She approached. "Water." Her voice came steady. "Small mercies." He looked at her then, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing dragging across her face with an intensity that made her want to step back and lean closer simultaneously. Dark eyes, the color of espresso, just as bitter, just as necessary for some people's survival. "Leave the pitcher." His voice carried the cadence of the old neighborhood, not the Italian-American most people knew from movies. Something older, layered with codes her grandmother had whispered over Sunday gravy. The accent of men who'd built empires on the Brooklyn docks while the rest of the city looked away. She set the pitcher down, careful not to meet those eyes again. Anything else, privacy. She turned, but voices from the booth behind them stopped her mid-step. 2 Americans loud with the carelessness of people who thought waitresses were furniture, telling you Rossi's getting impatient. "If your boss can't deliver the shipment routes by Friday, the whole deal's dead." Alessia kept walking, but her mind snagged on the words. Shipment routes. Deal. The way they'd said boss, like it was a title earned in blood. Behind her, the dark-eyed man spoke rapid, old Brooklyn Italian. Too fast for most people to catch. But Alessia had spent 2 years recording the last speakers in Bensonhurst, elderly voices talking about the docks and the old rules and a language dying in real time. She understood every syllable. U traditore, ammazzatilu dopo, the traitor, kill him later. The ceramic cup slipped from her fingers. It shattered against tile in a burst of sound that made every head turn, including his. Their eyes met across the cafe, and for a fraction of a second she saw something flicker in that dark gaze. Not anger, assessment. like he was cataloging her, filing her away in whatever mental database powerful men kept of potential problems. Then the Americans were moving, crowding him, and she crouched to pick up broken ceramic with hands that suddenly wanted to tremble. Her palm found a sharp edge. Blood welled bright and red. She looked up. He was staring directly at her, his expression transformed into something that made her blood run cold. He knew she'd understood. Alessia ran. Not obviously. She wasn't stupid enough to sprint for the door with her apron still on and blood dripping from her hand. But she abandoned the broken ceramic, mumbled something to Paolo about the bathroom, and walked with forced calm toward the back hallway. The bathroom mirror showed her two pale eyes too wide, a girl playing at research in a world that had just reminded her some games came with permanent consequences. She ran cold water over the cut, watching pink swirl down the drain while her mind raced through the old Brooklyn phrase again and again. U traditore, ammazzatilu dopo. She'd understood him, and he'd seen her understand, which meant what exactly? That she was now a liability, a witness to what a conversation in a language most people didn't even know existed anymore. Through the bathroom door she heard muted voices, chair legs scraping the hiss of the espresso machine. Normal sounds. Nothing felt normal anymore. When she emerged, Paolo grabbed her arm, his face gray. "Go home. I'll close alone. It's only 9. Go home, Alessia." The use of her full name instead of Allie made her stomach drop. Paolo never used her full name. She nodded, untying her apron with numb fingers. The cafe had emptied. All the booths that had been full 20 minutes ago now stood vacant, abandoned espresso cups leaving dark rings on wooden tables. No sign of the dark-eyed man or his people. No sign of the Americans. Just silence and the smell of coffee and something else, something metallic and wrong that might have been her imagination, or might have been the scent of decisions made in shadows. Paolo pressed an envelope into her hands. 2 weeks' pay. Don't come back. His voice cracked, and she understood then that whatever had happened in those few minutes after she'd dropped the cup, it had been enough to end things. Enough to make Paolo, who'd given her this job when she was desperate and had no references, pay her to disappear. Who asked about me? But she already knew, already felt the weight of those dark eyes following her even now. My cousin owns the building. I got a call. Paolo's hands shook as he turned away. They asked about you. Who you are, how long you've worked here. The envelope trembled in her grip. Who? Just go. To your apartment. Get what you need. Somewhere else. Stay with friends. My parents are in Scottsdale. Good. Paolo's eyes were wet. Alessia. I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd... He stopped, swallowed hard. Just go. The November air hit like a slap, cold and sharp with the threat of rain. She walked fast, head down, cutting through side streets she knew by heart. Her apartment was 12 blocks away, a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned decades ago. Rent control kept her there. Stubbornness kept her believing she could make it in this city on a teaching assistant's salary and dreams of tenure. She kept checking over her shoulder, kept seeing shadows that looked like men in expensive suits. By the time she reached her building, she'd almost convinced herself she was being paranoid. Almost. Then she saw the car. Black Mercedes, pristine and utterly out of place on this street of rusted Hondas and delivery vans, parked directly in front of her building. Engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. She stopped walking. Her keys dug into her palm, the cut one making her wince. Run, her instinct screamed. Run now. But where? She had $70 in her checking account, a maxed-out credit card, and a life that fit entirely within these 12 blocks. Run where the car door opened. He stepped out like something from a nightmare dressed in tailored wool. Taller than she'd thought, his presence somehow larger on the empty street than it had been in the cafe. The streetlight caught the planes of his face, turning him into something carved from shadow and sharp edges. They stared at each other across 15 feet of cracked pavement. Alessia Russo. Her name and his accent sounded like a judgment. Linguistics, Ph.D. candidate, Columbia University. specialization in dying American dialects and regional language preservation. Her throat closed. He'd looked her up. In less than an hour, he'd found everything. You live alone, no siblings, no boyfriend, no one who would notice if you disappeared. He took a step toward her movements, careful and deliberate, a predator trying not to spook prey before the trap closed. She should have screamed, should have run, should have done anything except stand there frozen while he approached close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker. Something that reminded her of Gianna's warnings about men who smiled with their mouths, but never their eyes. Only he wasn't smiling. He stopped 3 feet away. Quanto high? The question in old Brooklyn Italian in the dialect from her grandmother's generation shocked her into answering. 26. And you speak like you were born in Red Hook 60 years ago. His eyes narrowed. How? My grandmother. The words came out steady, surprising her. Gianna Falcone. She was from the old neighborhood. Taught me before she died. Something flickered across his face. Not quite emotion, but close. What was her maiden name? Falcone. From Red Hook. He went very still. For a long moment he just looked at her while the wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust and the distant harbor. Somewhere a siren wailed. New York sounds familiar and safe, except nothing felt safe anymore. Get in the car. No. His eyebrow lifted, the first genuine expression she'd seen on his face. No. I'm not getting in a car with someone who orders executions in dead languages. A pause. Then impossibly the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. Smart. He reached into his jacket. She tensed, but he only pulled out a phone, tapped something, showed her the screen. A photo, black and white old. 2 groups of people standing in front of a warehouse at the Brooklyn docks. Industrial cranes visible in the background. And there in the front row, "That's my Nana," she whispered. Gianna couldn't have been more than 18 in the photo, dark-haired and fierce-eyed, standing next to an older man with sharp features and the same careful stillness this man carried. And that he indicated, the older man, is my grandfather, Salvatore Lavaro. Our families knew each other in Brooklyn a lifetime ago. He pocketed the phone. Get in the car. Softer now. We need to talk about what you heard and what it means that you're the only person outside my family who speaks that dialect. This time, against every instinct screaming at her to run, she got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and danger. He slid into the seat beside her, not across, she noticed, with a spike of anxiety, but right next to her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The driver, thick-shouldered and silent, pulled smoothly into traffic. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without being overheard. He pulled out his phone, typed something. You're not in danger from me if that's what you're worried about. You literally ordered someone's death 2 hours ago. I ordered a traitor's execution. He said it like there was a difference. The man you heard me talk about sold information that got 3 of my people killed. That's not murder, Miss Russo. That's justice. The casual way he said it made her skin crawl. I don't want to be involved in this. You became involved the moment you understood what I said. He pocketed his phone, turned to face her fully. Do you know what old Brooklyn Italian is worth? Real old Brooklyn, not the tourist version they teach in language apps. It's not just a dying dialect. It's a security system. My family has used it for 3 generations to communicate in front of law enforcement rivals, anyone, because nobody speaks it anymore. Nobody understands it. He leaned back, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Except you. Her heart hammered against her ribs. So you're going to... What, kill me for knowing a language my grandmother taught me? If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather. I want to understand who you are. Why a Columbia PhD candidate is slinging coffee in Carroll Gardens. Why you chose to study the one dialect that could get you killed. The car turned onto the highway, Manhattan's lights streaking past the windows. They were heading downtown, away from her neighborhood, away from anything familiar. My dissertation is on linguistic extinction patterns in regional American dialects. I'm documenting variations before they disappear completely. My Nana was my primary informant before she died. The cafe job pays rent while I do field research in New York. There's a community in Bensonhurst. Older speakers mostly. I've been recording interviews mapping phonetic variations. She stopped. Why does any of this matter? He didn't answer immediately. The car pulled off the highway, navigating through streets that grew progressively quieter, darker. They were in Tribeca now, but not the trendy part. The part where warehouses still looked like warehouses. The car stopped in front of a building that might have been a factory once. No lights, no signs, nothing to indicate it was anything but abandoned. Out. Every self-preservation instinct she had screamed not to follow him. But she thought about Paulo's face, the 2 weeks' pay pressed into her hands, the way he'd said, "Don't come back." She thought about the Mercedes parked outside her apartment, about how thoroughly this man had researched her in less than an hour. She thought about how she didn't really have a choice. The building's interior contradicted its exterior completely. Where the outside was decay, the inside was polished concrete and expensive minimalism. Track lighting, modern furniture art that probably cost more than her education. Sit. He gestured to a leather sofa while he moved to a bar cart, poured 2 glasses of something amber. She sat, her backpack clutched in her lap like a shield. He handed her a glass, sat in the chair across from her. Not beside her this time, she noticed. Giving her space maybe, or just getting a better angle to watch her. That photo I showed you. My grandfather Salvatore Lavaro and your grandmother were part of the same dock network in Red Hook. He was what they called a mediator in the old days, someone both sides trusted to find solutions. He swirled his glass, watching light catch in the liquid. She never talked about it. Just taught me the language, songs, prayers, stories about the neighborhood before it changed. She was smart. The old families, the ones who came up in the 40s and 50s, they knew to forget, to assimilate, to bury the old ways. He looked at her then, and for the first time she saw something unguarded in his expression. Weariness, maybe, or the weight of something inherited and inescapable. But you didn't forget. My family couldn't afford to. He was quiet for a moment. Do you know what my grandfather did in Red Hook? She shook her head. He mediated disputes, dock conflicts, family vendettas, business disagreements. He was someone both sides trusted to find solutions without bloodshed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He brought that here. Built a network based on the old rules. Honor, family, silence. The mafia, she said quietly. That's what people call it. He didn't flinch from the word. We call it our thing. And yes, it's violent. It's criminal. It's everything you've seen in movies. But it's also structure, rules, a way of surviving in a world that doesn't want people like us to exist. People like you. People like our grandparents, he corrected. Immigrants with nothing. Italians who were treated like dirt and worse. My grandfather built something from nothing. I inherited it. The way he said inherited sounded like a prison sentence. She set her glass down, her hands steadier now. Why are you telling me this? Because you're a problem. I don't know how to solve. Brutal honesty. His eyes locked on hers. I can't let you walk away knowing what you know. But I can't. He stopped, something shifting in his expression. Your grandmother, Gianna, what did she tell you about Red Hook stories? About the docks, the neighborhood, the old families? Did she ever mention why she left, Alessia? Thought back to childhood afternoons in Gianna's kitchen, her hands kneading bread while she spoke in the old language, teaching words nobody else in the family wanted to learn. She said she left to find freedom, that Red Hook was beautiful but suffocating, that she needed air. He nodded, something sad flickering across his face. My grandfather said the same thing, that he came to Brooklyn to breathe. Did he? He died at 53. Heart attack during a negotiation. He finished his drink in one swallow. So, no. I don't think he did. The silence stretched between them, heavy with ghosts and inherited burdens. Finally he stood. I need you to do something for me. Here it was. The trap closing. What teach me? The way your grandmother taught you. The pronunciation. the idioms, the things that can't be found in books or recordings. He moved closer, intensity radiating from him like heat. I need to speak it the way she did, because right now it's the only advantage I have in a war that's about to go hot, and advantages keep people alive in my world. And if I say no, you won't. Not a threat, a certainty, because you're a linguist who dedicated years to preserving a dying language, and I'm offering you a native speaker to work with, because you need money and I'll pay you 10 times whatever your university gives you, and because he stopped something unreadable crossing his face. Because I think Gianna Falcone sent you to me, and I don't ignore signs from the dead. She should have laughed, should have called him crazy, should have demanded he take her home. Instead, she heard herself ask, what happened in 1962? He went very still. How do you know about 1962? The photo. Gianna was 18. That building behind you, I recognize it. It's where the old fish market used to be, before they tore it down in the 90s. She met his eyes. She had a scar on her left hand, between her thumb and forefinger. I asked her about it once when I was 12. She said she got it in Red Hook when she was 18, that there was a man who thought he could take what he wanted, that one night he tried with a young girl and Gianna stopped him with a fishing knife. His jaw tightened. She said the mediator made it disappear, the body, the blood, any evidence. She said he told her some men only understand one kind of justice. Alessia leaned forward. She said the mediator's name was Sal Lavaro. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an execution. My grandfather never told me that story. His voice came rough. Maybe he knew she'd tell it to the right person eventually. They stood there 6 inches apart, the city's ambient light cutting across his face in sharp angles. She could see the exhaustion he hid, the weight he carried, the cost of being born into a world he'd never chosen. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who'd run, who'd be too afraid or too moral or too smart to stay. His eyes searched hers. Someone who wouldn't look at me like I'm still human. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. You are still human. Debatable. But his mouth curved almost a smile. Teach me, he said quietly. Help me speak it the way they did, the way people who built something out of nothing spoke, before I lose the last connection to what my grandfather tried to be. She thought about Gianna's hands, scarred and strong, kneading dough and teaching a language most people thought was worthless. She thought about Paolo's face, gray with fear, paying her to disappear. She thought about $70 in her checking account and a dissertation committee that barely returned her emails. She thought about the way this man, this killer, this inheritor of violence had said your grandmother like a prayer. 1 month, she said, I'll teach you for 1 month. You pay me what you promised. You keep me safe. And when the month is done, I walk away clean. No looking back. No more involvement. He extended his hand. Deal. His palm was warm, calloused, the hand of someone who'd learned violence young and never forgotten. But his grip was careful, controlled, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. When do we start tomorrow? 9 a.m. He pulled out his phone, sent a text. Someone will collect your things from your apartment tonight. You'll stay at a safe house until the situation with Costa's people is resolved. What situation? The one where they saw you in the cafe, where they might wonder what you understood. He looked at her with those dark, assessing eyes. You're not going back to your life until I'm certain you're not a target. A woman appeared from somewhere in the building, 40-something and terrifying, moving with the efficiency of someone conducting a military operation. This is Santina. She'll take you to the house. Get you settled. Santina nodded once, all business. And Alessia. He waited until she looked back at him. Thank you. For not running. For giving me a chance to be something other than what people expect. She left without answering, following Santina into the November night, leaving behind the man who'd ordered an execution in a language only she could understand, the man whose grandfather had saved her grandmother 60 years ago, the man who might be her salvation or her destruction, and she wasn't sure which scared her more. The safe house in Carroll Gardens was a brownstone that cost more to furnish than most people earned in a decade. Original molding restored hardwood furniture that looked antique but was probably just expensive enough to pass for history. Santina stayed somewhere on the first floor, her presence more felt than seen, a shadow that moved through rooms with purposeful silence. Alessia didn't sleep. By 3 a.m. she was sitting at the bedroom desk, laptop open, trying to make sense of what her life had become in the span of 6 hours. She pulled up her dissertation files, recordings she'd made of old Brooklyn Italian speakers in Bensonhurst. Elderly voices talking about the docks, about traditions their children had abandoned, about a language dying in real time because nobody saw value in preserving what their parents had fought to forget. Then she opened a new document and started typing everything she could remember about Nico Lavaro's speech patterns. The way he pronounced certain vowels with a glottal stop her recordings never captured. The archaic verb forms he used that marked him as second-generation learning from someone who'd spoken it natively. The vocabulary choices that placed his family's origin in the Red Hook dock community, probably the same warehouse district where Gianna had killed a man and Sal Lavaro had made the evidence disappear. It was research, she told herself, just documentation. Not the fact that she couldn't stop thinking about the weariness in his voice when he'd talked about his grandfather dying at 53, about inheritance and breathing and building something from nothing, only to watch it calcify into the very thing you'd tried to escape. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Sleep. We start at 9. She stared at the message. How did he know she was awake? She got up, moved to the window. Across the street, partially hidden in shadow, sat the black Mercedes. Engine off now, but someone was inside watching. He was having her watched. Something between anger and something more dangerous flared in her chest. She texted back on impulse, "I don't take orders." The response came immediately, I noticed. "Sleep anyway." Despite everything, she smiled. Then she closed the laptop, lay down on a bed that cost more than her car, and tried to ignore the fact that a killer was watching her window to make sure she stayed safe. He arrived at exactly 9, carrying coffee and a leather portfolio. She'd managed 3 hours of sleep, showered in a bathroom with heated floors, and dressed in the clothes Santina had retrieved from her apartment. Jeans and a sweater that felt inadequate against the intensity of Nico Lavaro's presence in the brownstone's dining room. "You look tired. You look like you haven't slept in weeks." A pause, then that almost smile. Perceptive. He opened the portfolio, pulled out a stack of papers. Photographs, documents, things that looked disturbingly like dossiers. "Before we start the language work, you need to understand the current situation." "Do I? If you're going to be in my world even temporarily, you need to know the rules." He spread the papers across the table. "The man I was meeting with last night, the American, his name is David Brennan. He works for Gennaro Costa. Costa controls most of the port operations in New Jersey and parts of Brooklyn. They want to expand into territory my family has held for 3 generations. She picked up one of the photographs. Brennan, balding and sharp-eyed, standing next to someone who looked exactly like every movie mobster she'd ever seen. Thick neck, gold chains, expensive suit, worn badly. Gennaro Costa, 2nd generation. Thinks he's building an empire, but he's just repeating his father's mistakes. The contempt in Nico's voice was sharp enough to cut. "The shipment routes Brennan mentioned are smuggling paths through the port. Medicine mostly. Gray market pharmaceuticals from Europe. That's illegal." He looked at her like she'd said something adorable and stupid. "Everything I do is illegal, Alessia. The question is whether it's harmful. Semantics. Philosophy." He tapped another photo. Shipping containers with official stamps. "These medicines cost 10 times as much in America as they do in Europe. Same formula, same manufacturer. The only difference is patent law and corporate greed. I bring them in, sell them to community clinics at cost. People get insulin they can afford. I make enough to cover expenses. And Costa would rather control the supply, jack up prices, and pocket the difference." He pulled out another document. "A coroner's report. 3 of my men died in a warehouse fire last week. The fire was set. Brennan provided the intelligence that told Costa's people where to strike." She set down the photograph coffee, suddenly tasting like ash. "The man you ordered killed. The traitor who got 3 men with families burned alive for money." The brutality of it sat heavy in the room. What does this have to do with me? Brennan saw you. Saw me look at you when you dropped that cup. He leaned back, arms crossed. If he mentions it to Costa, if they start wondering why you mattered, they'll investigate. They'll find out what you study. They'll wonder if you understood things you shouldn't have. And then you become a liability they'll want to eliminate. The words hung between them, casual and terrifying. How long do I have to hide until I deal with Costa? He said it like he was discussing grocery shopping. A week, maybe 2. And deal with means I remove the threat permanently. His eyes met hers unflinching. This is what I am, Alessia. What my family is. We don't call lawyers or file lawsuits. We solve problems the old way. She should have been horrified. Should have demanded he take her to the police, to the FBI, to anyone who represented law and order and civilization. Instead, she heard herself say, "Show me the recordings you've been using to learn the dialect." He blinked, surprised. What? You said you learned from recordings and old men. I want to hear them, to understand what you're working with. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled, handed it over. My grandfather. Recorded 6 months before he died. She pressed play. An old man's voice filled the room, speaking old Brooklyn Italian with the accent of someone who'd learned it as a child, had used it to survive, had passed it down as both gift and burden. He was telling a story about the docks in winter, about the way ice formed on the pilings, about the sound of ships groaning against their moorings in the dark. It sounded like Gianna. Same rhythms, same dropped consonants, same way of turning English loan words into something that belonged to both languages and neither. She looked up to find Nico watching her with an expression she couldn't name. Same neighborhood, same stories. He took the phone back. Same language. And suddenly the distance between us, criminal and civilian, killer and academic, felt less like a chasm and more like a thread, pulled taut, connecting two people who'd inherited the same ghosts. Teach me, he said again, softer now. Help me speak it the way they did. She should have said no. She said yes. The lessons became a structure she could cling to in a world that had stopped making sense. Every morning at 9, Nico arrived with coffee. Always black for him, always a cappuccino for her, always from the same place in Bay Ridge where an old woman named Rosa made them the way Gianna had, with the kind of care that turned ritual into art. They worked for 3 hours in the Brownstones' dining room, Santina moving silently around them, the Mercedes parked outside like a metal guardian that never blinked. He was a better student than she expected. Focused, relentless, absorbing pronunciation corrections with the same intensity she imagined he brought to everything else. When she explained the difference between Red Hook and Bensonhurst vowel shifts, he made her repeat examples until he could replicate them perfectly. Again. He'd listen, eyes closed, as she spoke. You skeku. The donkey she'd translate unnecessarily. You skeku, he'd repeat, mimicking the exact intonation, the subtle glottal stop, the way the vowels compressed. Then he'd record himself, play it back, adjust. Try again. Perfectionist didn't begin to cover it. But what surprised her more was what happened in the margins, the moments between grammar lessons and vocabulary drills, when he'd lean back, coffee in hand, and ask questions that had nothing to do with linguistics. Why Columbia third day? She was correcting his written exercises, marking where he'd used modern constructions instead of the old forms. Best linguistics department on the East Coast. Plus I could stay in New York. You like New York, I understand New York. She looked up. There's a difference. He studied her with those eyes that always seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. You understand things most people miss. That's just observation. I'm trained to notice linguistic variations. I'm not talking about language. He set his cup down, leaned forward. You noticed my men in the cafe before I sat down. You registered the Americans as a threat. You dropped that cup at the exact moment to break the tension in the room. That was an accident. Nothing you do is an accident. He said it with certainty. You're careful, controlled. You analyze before you act. It felt too accurate, too seen. She shifted the papers between them. We should get back to, my grandfather used to say that the best mediators were the ones who could read a room in 3 seconds, that you had to see the truth people were hiding before they realized they were hiding it. His voice went soft, distant. "Is that what you do?" "It's what I'm supposed to do. Be the mediator, the one both sides trust, the one who finds solutions." He picked up his pen, spun it between his fingers, nervous energy in someone who otherwise held himself with absolute control. But New York isn't Red Hook in 1962. The old rules don't always apply, and sometimes the only solution is violence. The weight in his voice made her look up. He was staring at the papers on the table without seeing them, jaw tight. "The 3 men who died. You knew them. I grew up with Marco. His son just turned 6. He looked at her then, and the grief in his eyes was raw and unguarded. "Luca was supposed to get married next month, and Santo was my cousin's kid. 23. Just starting out. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry." He stood abruptly, moved to the window. "Be smart enough to understand that this is my world, that people die, that I will kill Brennan and probably others before this is finished, that you're sitting here teaching me grammar while I plan executions." The brutal honesty should have terrified her, should have sent her running. Instead, she stood, moved to stand beside him at the window, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his body. Nana had a scar on her left hand between her thumb and forefinger. "I asked her about it once when I was 12. He glanced at her, waiting. "She said she got it in Red Hook when she was 18, that there was a man who thought he could take what he wanted from a young girl at the docks. That one night he tried and Gianna stopped him with a fishing knife." Nico went very still. "She said the local mediator made it disappear. The body, the blood, any evidence. She said he told her that some men only understand one kind of justice." Alessia looked up at him. "She said the mediator's name was Sal Lavaro, that he was the only honest man in a dishonest world, that he protected people who couldn't protect themselves." The silence stretched taut between them. Morning light cut across his face in sharp angles, and she could see the exhaustion he hid, the weight he carried, the cost of being born into a world where violence was inheritance and peace was a luxury nobody could afford. "You're not what I expected." His voice came quiet. "What did you expect? Someone who'd run, who'd be too afraid or too moral or too smart to stay." His eyes searched hers. "Someone who wouldn't look at me like I'm still human." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "You are still human. Debatable." But his mouth curved almost a smile. The philosophers would argue. The philosophers didn't grow up watching their grandfather mediate blood feuds, didn't inherit a world built on violence and honor and impossible choices. She interrupted, surprising herself. "You understand too much." He said it like an accusation and a confession. "Or maybe you're used to people not understanding at all." The distance between them felt charged, dangerous. She could smell his cologne cedar and something darker, see the faint scar on his jaw she'd never noticed before, feel the pull of something that had nothing to do with linguistics or safety or logic. His phone shattered, the moment buzzing with brutal insistence. He stepped back, pulled it out, and she watched his expression transform into something cold and lethal. "What is it, Costa?" "He knows you exist. He's asking questions." He was already moving toward the door, texting rapidly. "How Brennan talked before he died. Mentioned a woman at the cafe who reacted wrong." He looked at her, and the man who'd been almost vulnerable seconds ago had vanished, replaced by someone carved from ice and fury. "You need to disappear. Today. Santina will take you somewhere safe." "Where are you going to have a conversation with Gennaro Costa, to make sure he understands that you're under my protection?" The way he said it made something in her chest tighten. "Nico." He stopped at the door, looked back. "My name is Nico." Then he was gone, and she was left standing in the empty room with the ghost of his almost touch still warming the space between them. Santina drove like she was being chased, or maybe like she was doing the chasing, and everything else just needed to get out of the way. They'd left the brownstone within 15 minutes of Nico's departure. Alessia's hastily packed bag thrown in the trunk of a different car, a nondescript Honda that blended into traffic like water. "Where are we going upstate?" "There's a house in the Catskills. Off the grid, no digital footprint. You'll be safe there." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." Which told her nothing and everything. They drove in silence for an hour, the city giving way to suburbs, then to the bare trees and gray skies of late autumn in the Hudson Valley. Her phone sat in her lap, useless. Santina had made her turn it off, remove the SIM card. "You care about him." Santina said it suddenly, eyes never leaving the mirrors. Alessia looked at her. She was older than initially apparent, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair, and the kind of face that had seen things nobody should see but had chosen to keep looking anyway. "I barely know him. That's not what I asked." Alessia watched the landscape blur past. "Does it matter?" "It matters because men like Nico don't let people in." Santina navigated around a semi-hand steady on the wheel. His grandfather raised him to be the next mediator, taught him that attachment was weakness, that caring got people killed, that the family came first always. That sounds lonely. It kept him alive. She glanced at Alessia. "Until you. I'm not. We're just." She stopped because she didn't know how to finish that sentence. Just language lessons felt like a lie. Just business felt worse. Just two people connected by dead grandparents and a language nobody else spoke felt closest to truth but still miles from complete. Keep telling yourself that. Santina's smile was sharp. "But I've worked for the Lavaro family for 20 years and I've never seen Nico look at someone the way he looks at you." Her chest tightened. "How does he look at me? Like you're the first real thing in a world made of shadows." The cabin was exactly what she'd expected from the phrase safe house in the Catskills. Dark wood windows that reflected bare branches, isolated enough that the nearest neighbor was invisible through the trees. It probably looked charming in summer, but in November it seemed haunted, a place where people came to hide from consequences that always found them anyway. Santina did a sweep of the property, checking locks and sight lines with professional efficiency. There's food in the kitchen, firewood stacked on the porch. Don't go outside unless necessary. Don't turn your phone on. Don't contact anyone. What if something happens? She handed Alessia a different phone. Basic, probably untraceable. This has one number programmed. Use it only for emergencies. Then she was gone, and Alessia was alone with silence and the sound of wind in the pines and the growing certainty that she'd made a terrible mistake, trusting a man who solved problems with executions and called it justice. She lasted 3 hours before she broke. Not the rules about going outside or contacting people, but the rule about staying calm, staying rational, staying separate from whatever was happening back in the city with Nico and Costa and the violence he'd promised. She called the emergency number. It rang once. "What's wrong?" Nico's voice sharp with concern. "Nothing. I just..." She stopped, gripped the phone tighter. "Is it done?" "With Costa." A pause. "You called the emergency line to check on me. You said you were going to have a conversation. Conversations with you seem to involve guns." "Sometimes." She heard something in the background. Traffic, maybe. Voices. "I'm fine." The conversation was productive. Meaning Costa understands that you're off limits, that touching you would start a war he can't win. A car door slammed on his end. "You're safe, Alessia." Relief and something else flooded through her. "When can I come back?" "Few more days. I need to make sure his people got the message, and if they didn't, then I'll send a clearer one. Matter-of-fact, terrifying." She moved to the window, watched darkness settling over the trees like a blanket designed to smother rather than comfort. "Nico." "Yes, thank you for protecting me." Silence on the line, then quieter, more raw than she'd heard him. "You shouldn't thank me for fixing a problem I created. You didn't create this. I put you in danger the moment I spoke in that cafe. I should have been more careful. Should have known someone might understand." His voice roughened. "My grandfather used to say that carelessness in our world doesn't get forgiven. It gets punished, usually with blood." The weight in his words made her throat tight. "You're not your grandfather." "No." A bitter laugh. He was better at this, more ruthless, more willing to make the hard calls without... He stopped. "Without what?" Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped lower, intimate despite the distance. "Without caring about collateral damage." "I'm not collateral damage. You're a linguistics student who should be working on your dissertation, not hiding in a cabin because a mafia boss decided to speak in a dead language around the wrong person. The self-recrimination in his voice cut deeper than any threat. You should hate me. I should. She agreed, surprising herself. But I don't. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Why? He finally asked. Because you looked at me like I was real. Because you grieve for the men you lost. Because you carry your grandfather's legacy like a crown of thorns and never complain about the weight. She stopped, aware she was saying too much, revealing things she hadn't admitted to herself. Because you brought me coffee every morning, the kind my Nana would have approved of. A soft sound that might have been a laugh. That's a terrible reason to trust someone. Then I'm terrible at self-preservation. No. Definite now. You're too smart for your own good. Too brave. Too... He stopped again, and she heard something shift in his breathing. I should let you go. You need to rest. I'm not tired. Liar. Says the man who hasn't slept in days. How did you... He paused. The circles under your eyes. The way you held your coffee cup like you needed it to stay vertical. Too observant. It's dangerous how much you see. So is what I feel when you look at me. The words escaped before she could stop them. Honest and reckless and impossible to take back. The silence stretched so long she thought the connection had died. Then Betta. He said it softly. Beautiful. Don't say things like that when I'm 2 hours away and can't. Make sure you understand what you'd be choosing. His voice dropped to something raw. I'm not a good man, Alessia. I've killed. I'll kill again. My world is blood and secrets and violence. I know. You know the theory, not the reality. Then show me the reality. She pressed her palm against the cold window glass. When I come back, no more half-truths or careful distance. Show me who you really are. And if you run, then you'll know I wasn't strong enough for this. Her reflection stared back from the dark glass eyes, too bright. But I don't think I'll run. He made a sound, half groan, half laugh. You're going to destroy me, or save you. Same thing, maybe. A breath. Go to sleep, Betta. I'll call tomorrow. Nico. Yes. Don't get killed doing something stupid and noble. No promises. But she heard the smile in his voice. The line went dead. She stood at the window for a long time after watching her breath fog the glass, feeling something dangerous and inevitable taking root in her chest. Somewhere in the city, a killer was protecting her and she was falling for him. And the worst part was knowing that in his world falling usually meant dying. The call came at 2 a.m. 4 days into her isolation. Not from Nico. From Santina, her voice tight with something between fury and fear. Get dressed. Someone's coming for you. Alessia bolted upright, heart slamming. What? There's a leak. Someone in Nico's organization told Costa where you are. She heard an engine's speed urgency in every syllable. I'm 40 minutes out. You need to hide now. The line died. Alessia moved on instinct, no time for panic. Grabbed the emergency phone, her laptop, the bag Santina had packed. Killed the lights. Moved to the back of the cabin where a window overlooked the tree line. In the distance, maybe half a mile out, she saw headlights cutting through the darkness. 2 cars coming fast, no subtlety, just pure predatory intent. She ran. The November woods were skeletal and hostile, branches catching her clothes roots, trying to trip her, darkness so complete she might as well have been blind. She'd thought to grab the flashlight from the kitchen but didn't dare use it. The beam would give her away faster than footsteps. Behind her she heard car doors slam. Voices. Men spreading out to search with the efficiency of people who'd done this before, who knew how fear made prey stupid, how darkness turned the hunter's advantage into the hunted's nightmare. She kept moving deeper into the trees, breath coming in ragged gasps, terror making her clumsy. The laptop bag banged against her hip. The emergency phone pressed against her palm like a talisman that might ward off bullets if she just believed hard enough. She should call Nico, should tell him what was happening. But what could he do from 2 hours away except listen to her die? A flashlight beam swept through the trees to her left. Close. Too close. She dropped behind a fallen log, pressing herself into dead leaves and mud, trying to become invisible, trying to remember how to breathe without sound. Footsteps approached. Stopped. Anything. A voice. Rough American, the kind of accent that came from watching too many mob movies and thinking that made you dangerous. Nothing. You checked the north side? Yeah, she's not there. They moved on and she waited until the footsteps faded before letting herself breathe again. The cold soaked through her jeans immediately, but she didn't move, didn't risk it. Her phone vibrated. Text from Santina. Where are you? She typed back coordinates from memory. They'd studied a map of the property her first day here. Santina's idea of orientation, including escape routes and defensible positions, because apparently that's what passed for normal in Nico Lavaro's world. Santina's response came immediately. Stay hidden. Nico's coming. Which meant he'd been called, which meant he was probably driving like a maniac through the night to reach her, about to do something catastrophically violent to the men hunting her through these woods. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like hope. She moved again, circling wide through the woods, trying to put distance between herself and the searchers. Her hands were numb, her jacket inadequate against the November cold, but she kept moving, kept silent, kept breathing. Then she heard it. A new engine different from the others. Closer to the road, the black Mercedes, and gunfire. The sound cracked through the night like breaking bones, sharp and brutal and final. 3 shots, then silence so complete it felt suffocating. She should have stayed hidden, should have waited for Santina or the police, or someone sane. Instead, she ran toward the sound, toward the violence, toward the man who'd promised to protect her, and met it in ways that left bodies in his wake. The cabin clearing was chaos. One of the cars that had been chasing her sat with its doors open, empty. The other was a wreck of shattered glass and bullet holes, steam rising from the ruined engine like a mechanical death rattle. And in the center of it all stood Nico. He had a gun in each hand, his suit jacket discarded white shirt stark against the darkness. 2 bodies lay motionless near the wrecked car. A third man knelt on the ground, hands raised, blood streaming from his shoulder. Nico's expression was something from nightmares. Cold, empty, merciless, the face of someone who'd killed before and would kill again without hesitation or regret. "Who sent you?" His voice could have frozen blood. "Go to hell." The kneeling man spat. Nico moved faster than she could track, pistol whipping the man across the face with casual violence. "Wrong answer. Who sent you, Costa?" The man choked on blood. "Costa paid us. Said the girl was worth 50 grand. And who told Costa where to find her silence?" Nico pressed the gun against the man's temple. "Last chance. I don't know. I swear. Costa got a call, said he had a location. That's all I know." The man's voice cracked. "Please. I got kids. So did the men your boss burned alive." Nico's finger moved to the trigger. "Stop." The word escaped her before she could think. Every head turned. Nico's eyes found hers across the clearing, and she watched something break in his expression, the cold killer mask fracturing into shock and fury and fear. Christo. Alessia. He moved toward her weapon, still drawn, checking her for injuries with terrified efficiency. "I told you to hide. You were going to execute him. He was hunting you." Nico grabbed her arm with his free hand, not rough but desperate, needing to confirm she was real and whole and not bleeding out in the dark woods. "Did they touch you? Did anyone?" "I'm fine." She pulled back, looked at the kneeling man, at the bodies, at the evidence of what Nico Lavaro became when someone threatened what he'd claimed to protect. "But you can't just kill. I can and I will." He stepped between her and the hired gun, a wall of lethal protection. "These men were paid to kidnap or kill you. They don't get mercy. He has children. He should have thought of that before taking money to hunt an innocent woman." Nico's voice went flat, final. "This is my world, Alessia. This is what I am, what I have to be to keep people safe." She looked at him. Really looked at the blood spatter on his shirt, at the bodies he'd made with those elegant hands, at the gun that hadn't wavered once from the kneeling man's skull. This was the reality. Not language lessons over coffee. Not almost touches in brownstone dining rooms. Not phone calls where he said beta like a prayer. This. Violence and death and choices that left blood on expensive shoes. If you pull that trigger, I won't stop you. She said it quietly, meeting his eyes. But I need you to know that I'm watching. That I see you. That this choice right now is yours. Not your grandfather's legacy. Not the family honor. Yours. He stared at her, the gun still pressed against the hired killer's head jaw so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Something warred in his expression, decades of training against something newer, more fragile, more human. Then slowly, he lowered the weapon. Santina. He called without looking away from Alessia. Take this piece of trash to the hospital. Make sure he understands what happens if he or Costa come near her again. Santina appeared from the shadows when had she arrived and hauled the bleeding man toward a car. Nico holstered his guns, closed the distance between them in 3 strides, and pulled Alessia against his chest with enough force to steal her breath. Chukaru assai dolokime. He whispered it against her hair, the old Brooklyn Italian rough with emotion. More precious than my eyes. If they'd hurt you, they didn't. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heart hammering against her cheek. You got here in time. Barely. His hands fisted in her jacket. There's a traitor in my organization, someone who sold you out, someone I trusted. She pulled back enough to see his face. The fury there could have scorched earth. Then we find them, together. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when someone put a price on my head. She met his eyes steady despite the adrenaline still screaming through her veins. And when I decided I wasn't running from this, from you, something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to something raw and desperate. You should run. You should get as far from me as possible. Probably. She reached up, touched the scar on his jaw she'd noticed days ago. But I'm terrible at self-preservation, remember? He caught her hand, pressed it harder against his face like he needed the contact to believe she was real. Was choosing this impossible thing despite every reason not to. Beta. His voice came hoarse. Show me, she whispered. You promised to show me who you really are. No more half-truths. You're looking at it. Bitter, broken. This is who I am. Someone who kills, who makes corpses. Who... She kissed him. Not gentle, not careful, desperate and reckless, her hands fisting in his shirt, tasting his sharp intake of breath lost against her mouth. He froze for one shocked second. Then he was kissing her back with the intensity of a man dying of thirst, his hands in her hair, his body a wall of heat and barely controlled violence pressed against hers. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were black in the darkness. This is a mistake. He said it against her lips. Definitely. You'll get hurt. Being close to me always ends in blood. Then we'll be careful. I don't know how to be careful with you. His forehead pressed against hers. You make me want impossible things. Like what? Like keeping you. Raw honesty. Like building something that isn't just survival and violence. Like believing I could be someone worth your trust. My chest ached. You already are. You don't know everything I've done. I know enough. She pulled back, made him look at her. I know you grieve. I know you protect. I know you're trying to be better than what you inherited. That's enough. He laughed, shaky and disbelieving. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. Can't I be both? This time when he kissed her, it was softer, reverent, like she was something holy instead of reckless. In the distance, sirens began to wail, closing in on the violence that had already been cleaned up, the evidence already disappearing the way it always did in Nico Lavaro's world. We need to go, he murmured against her mouth. Police will ask questions. What about the bodies? Santina will handle it. He kept his arm around her as they moved toward the Mercedes. This is what I meant about my world. Evidence disappears. Violence gets cleaned up. Everything happens in shadows. I understand. Do you? He opened the car door, his eyes searching hers. Because once you cross this line with me, there's no going back to coffee shops and dissertations. You'll be part of this. Part of my world. She thought about Gianna's scar, about Sal Lavaro making bodies disappear, about the inheritance they'd both received, him violence, her, the language that named it. "I crossed the line the moment I understood what you said in that cafe," she told him, climbing into the car. "Everything since has just been deciding whether to run forward or back." She met his eyes. Forward. Always forward. He smiled, then really smiled, beautiful and dangerous and true. "Chiu karu asai." He said it again, and closed the door between her and the November cold, between her and the life she'd had 4 days ago, between her and any chance of returning to the world where violence was theoretical and killers didn't kiss like they were drowning and you were air. They didn't go back to the brownstone. Nico drove them to Manhattan, to a building in Tribeca that wore wealth-like armor. Penthouse-level, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city's glittering sprawl like a kingdom he'd claimed through blood and strategy. "This is where I go when I need to think. Nobody knows about this place except Santina. Not even your family. Especially not my family." He moved through the apartment, turning on minimal lighting glow, soft enough to feel intimate rather than exposed. "My uncle thinks I should be more like my grandfather, more ruthless, more willing to expand territory and start wars. But you're not. I've started plenty of wars, just more carefully than he'd like." He poured whiskey into crystal glasses, handed her one. "The old generation sees hesitation as weakness. And what do you see it as? Survival." He took a long drink. "My grandfather died at 53, my father at 48. Heart attack during a negotiation, stroke during a meeting. Both of them burned out trying to hold the family together through violence and willpower. You're trying to find another way. I'm trying not to die before 40. He set his glass down with more force than necessary. "The medicines I smuggle, the ones Costa wants to control, they started because my father couldn't afford his heart medication. The pharmaceutical companies wanted 10 times what it cost in Europe. He chose between his health and keeping the family business afloat. He chose the business. Always." Nico's reflection in the window looked haunted. "And when he died, I inherited an empire built on bodies and a promise I made to myself. Find a way to make the violence mean something. To use what we are for something beyond just power. That's why the medicine smuggling. It's how I sleep at night, knowing that the blood on my hands pays for insulin someone's grandmother can afford, for cancer medications, for treatments that shouldn't cost more than rent." The complexity of him stole her breath. Killer and healer, criminal and protector man trying to redeem an inheritance written in violence. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect, a monster maybe? Or a man who justified everything with power and tradition?" She touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "Not someone trying to be better while knowing they'll probably fail. I will fail." Certainty in his voice. "The family will demand things. Rivals will push. I'll have to choose between the right thing and the safe thing. And I'll choose safety because that's what keeps people alive. Like tonight. Like tonight." He covered her hand with his. "I would have killed that man without hesitation if you hadn't stopped me. Would you have regretted it?" A pause. "No. Which is what makes me dangerous." She should have pulled away. Should have recognized this for what it was, a confession of monstrosity wrapped in beautiful words. Instead she kissed him again, and this time it wasn't desperate or reckless. This time it was a choice made with open eyes, full knowledge of what she was accepting. He responded like she'd broken something in him, his control fracturing as he pulled her closer, hands sliding into her hair, tilting her head back, deepening the kiss until she couldn't think past the taste of him and whiskey and want. "Tell me to stop." He breathed against her neck mouth, tracing the line of her throat. "Tell me you came to your senses. I don't want to." "Betta." It came out ragged. "I can't promise you safety. Can't promise you normal. Everything I touch turns complicated and dangerous. Then I'll be complicated and dangerous too." She pulled his mouth back to hers. "Show me all of it. The violence and the vulnerability. The man who kills and the man who grieves." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes, his own dark and wild and wanting. If I do this, if we do this, you're mine, under my protection, in my world. No going back. I know. The universities won't want you. The police will watch you. My enemies will use you against me. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Your life will never be simple again. It stopped being simple the moment I understood old Brooklyn Italian. Maybe. Or maybe it stopped when you decided not to run. Same thing. He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth against his, like he was branding this moment into memory before it could be taken away. There's a traitor, his voice rough against her lips. Someone in my organization sold your location to Costa. Until I find them, you're not safe. Then we find them together. This isn't your... Stop telling me what's my fight or not. She gripped his shirt, held him close. I'm in this now. With you. For whatever comes. He stared at her like she was something miraculous and terrifying. You're going to get your heart broken. Probably. Or killed. Less likely with you protecting me. I failed tonight. You got there in time. She kissed the corner of his mouth, his jaw, the pulse hammering in his throat. You saved me. Again. Chukaru Asai. More precious than my eyes. If I lose you, you won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you. She pulled back, met his gaze steadily. But we can choose this anyway. Choose each other despite the danger. His hands tightened on her hips. That's the most reckless thing I've ever heard. Good thing I'm terrible at self-preservation. He laughed then, real and surprised and beautiful, and she let herself fall completely into this impossible thing. Later they lay tangled together on his bed, the skyline painting shadows across bare skin, the city alive beyond the windows with sirens and horns, and the endless rhythm of millions of lives intersecting without ever truly touching. Tell me about the traitor. She spoke into the darkness. What do you know? His fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. Only 5 people knew where the safe house was. Santina, my uncle Rocco, my nephew Carmine, my second-in-command Antonio, and me. You trust Santina with my life. No hesitation. Your uncle has been trying to push you toward more aggressive expansion. Thinks you're weak for not starting a full war with Costa. His hand stilled. But he's family. Blood. Blood doesn't always mean loyal. In my world, it's supposed to. Bitter. The first rule. Family above everything. What about Antonio? 20 years with my family. Saved my life twice. He shifted, pulled her closer. I can't believe he'd betray me. That leaves Carmine. Silence. Your nephew. Carmine's ambitious, wants more responsibility, more territory. Nico's voice went flat. He's also my sister's son. If I accuse him and I'm wrong, you'll fracture the family. And if I'm right, I'll have to kill my nephew. The words hung heavy between them. There's no good outcome. She turned to face him in the darkness. Then we find proof, real evidence, something that makes the choice clear. And if the evidence points to Carmine, then you do what you have to do. But you don't have to do it alone. He pulled her against his chest, heartbeat steady beneath her ear. I don't know how to let someone in, how to share this burden. You start by trusting that I'm strong enough to carry it with you. You are. He pressed his lips to her hair. That's what terrifies me. They stayed like that. As the night deepened, 2 people from different worlds choosing each other, despite every reason not to, while somewhere in the city's shadows, a traitor was planning their next move. The evidence came from an unexpected source. Nico's accountant, a nervous man named Frank, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, arrived at the penthouse at 7 a.m. with a folder of financial records. I'm sorry, Mr. Lavarro. Frank spread papers across the dining table. But you asked me to flag any unusual transactions. This is very unusual. Alessia watched from the kitchen, coffee in hand, as Nico examined the documents with focused intensity. Carmine. He spoke the name like a death sentence. He's been moving money to offshore accounts. Not just moving, Frank corrected nervously. Accepting payments, large ones, from a shell corporation that when I traced it leads back to the Costa family. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an execution. How long? Nico's voice was ice. 6 months, maybe longer. Frank pulled out another document. And there's this. Phone records. Carmine called a number registered to one of Costa's lieutenants 3 hours before the attack on the safe house. Alessia set her coffee down, moved closer. The evidence was damning. Dates, times, amounts that told a story of systematic betrayal. This is enough. Nico spoke quietly. More than enough. Frank gathered his papers with shaking hands. What do you want me to do with this? Nothing. I'll handle it. He stood, and she saw the transformation happen. The man who'd held her last night vanishing behind the mediator who made impossible choices. Thank you, Frank. Send your bill to Santina. When Frank left, Nico stood at the window staring out at the morning light like it held answers. What happens now? Now I call a family meeting. Present the evidence. Let Carmine explain. His reflection in the glass looked carved from stone. And then I do what my grandfather would do. What I have to do. You're going to kill him. He betrayed the family. Sold you out. Got 3 men murdered. No emotion in his voice. There's only one penalty for that. He's your nephew, which makes it worse. The first crack in his control. If it was anyone else I could delegate. But Carmine is family. Blood. It has to be me. She moved to him, took his hands. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. You said I'm in this with you, that I'm yours. She gripped his fingers tighter. Then let me be there. Let me witness what this world demands. Alessia, you don't understand what you're asking. I understand exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking to stand beside you when you do the hardest thing you've ever had to do, to be there so you don't carry it alone. His jaw worked. You'll hate me after. I won't. You'll see what I'm capable of, what I really am. I already know what you are, and I'm still here. She touched his face. Let me be strong enough for this. For you. The war in his expression broke her heart. Finally he nodded. But you stay beside Santina. You don't speak. You don't interfere. I won't. And if it becomes too much, if you need to leave, you go. No shame. No judgment. I won't leave. He pulled her against him, held her like she was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She breathed in his scent. But you have me anyway. The family meeting took place in a warehouse in Red Hook, the old kind, where ships used to unload cargo in the 50s, where blood could soak into concrete and disappear without a trace or a witness willing to testify. Nico's Uncle Rocco was there, thick-bodied and hostile. Antonio, the second in command, looking grim. Santina by Alessia's side hand, resting casually near the gun beneath her jacket. And Carmine, 28. Handsome in the way dangerous men often are, with the Lavaro dark eyes and the kind of charm that probably got him out of trouble his whole life. Until now. Nico arrived last, his presence transforming the space. Everyone stood straighter, quieter as he walked to the center of the warehouse where a single chair waited. Carmine. His voice echoed off concrete. Sit. Carmine's eyes darted to the exits, to his grandfather, to the other men. Nico, what's this about sit? The command in that word made Carmine obey. Nico pulled out the financial records, dropped them on a crate beside the chair. 6 months of payments from Costa. Phone calls to his lieutenant. And this. He held up the final document. A recording of you giving Costa the location of the safe house where Alessia was staying. The color drained from Carmine's face. You sold out the family, got Marco, Luca, and Santo killed, put an innocent woman's life in danger for money. I can explain. Don't. Nico moved closer. Don't insult me with lies. The evidence is absolute. Uncle Rocco stepped forward. Nico, he's family. We can. What? Nico turned on him. Forgive betrayal. Ignore 3 dead men. Pretend that family means anything if we don't enforce consequences. The warehouse went silent. Nono taught us one thing above all else: that the family survives through loyalty, through trust, through knowing that betrayal has only one answer. He pulled out a gun, held it loosely at his side. Carmine started to shake. "Please, Nico. Please. I made a mistake. You made a choice." Nico's expression was empty of everything except cold judgment. And choices have consequences. Alessia watched it happen like it was a movie, distant and surreal and impossible. Watched Nico raise the gun. Watched Carmine start to cry. Watched the family stand silent, bearing witness to what happened when you broke the only rules that mattered in a world built on blood. And then, wait. Her voice cracked through the warehouse. Every head turned. Santina grabbed her arm, hissed a warning, but she pulled free, moved toward Nico. "Wait!" He stared at her like she'd struck him. "Alessia, get back. You promised. You promised to show me who you really are, the violence and the vulnerability." She stopped just out of reach. "This is the violence." "No. This is you doing what you think you have to do, what you've been taught, what the family demands." She took another step. "But you told me you wanted to be different, to find another way. There is no other way. Then let's find one." She looked at Carmine crying in the chair, then back at Nico. "You said your grandfather died trying to hold the family together through violence, that your father did the same. Are you going to repeat their pattern, or are you going to try something new?" The gun in his hand trembled. "He betrayed us." Nico's voice broke. "The law demands, make a new law." She moved close enough to touch him now. "Be the mediator who finds solutions, who builds something different. If you show mercy, you look weak. You look strong enough to choose compassion over tradition." She covered his hand with hers, the gun between their palms, strong enough to break the cycle. For an endless moment they stood there, killer and civilian, inherited violence and chosen mercy. The weight of 4 generations pressing down on a single choice. Then Nico lowered the gun. "Carmine." His voice was rough. "You're out. Exiled. You take nothing. You leave New York. You never contact this family again." Carmine sobbed with relief. "But if you ever speak about family business, if you contact Costa, if you so much as breathe our name—" Nico's eyes went dead. "I will find you, and next time no one will stop me." Uncle Rocco started to protest, but Nico silenced him with a look. "The family survives through loyalty, but it survives through mercy too, through knowing when to bend instead of break." He looked at Alessia, then something raw and grateful in his eyes. "My grandfather's way built an empire, but it also killed him at 53. I'm choosing a different way, starting now." 3 weeks later, Alicia stood in Nico's Tribeca apartment watching snow fall over Manhattan, the city looking clean under white like winter could absolve sins and start fresh. She didn't believe it, but it was pretty to imagine. Behind her, Nico emerged from his study phone in hand. "Costa wants to meet." "Is that safe?" "Probably not. But the war's been escalating. His people hit one of our medicine shipments yesterday. We retaliated against his ports. If we don't find a solution, we're looking at full-scale violence. So you're going to mediate. Trying to." He slipped an arm around her waist, pulled her against his side. "Be what my grandfather was. Find the middle ground. What are you offering territory split? He keeps New Jersey, I keep Brooklyn. We share the medicine routes. Both take smaller profits but avoid war." He rested his chin on top of her head. "It's not perfect, but it's survival. Carmine's in California." Santina confirmed he is working construction, keeping his head down. Any contact with Costa known. Nico's hand tightened on her hip. "You saved his life that day. We saved his life. I would have killed him. Would have repeated every pattern my grandfather and father followed. You showed me there was another choice." She touched his face, feeling the familiar sharp angles. "You showed yourself. I just reminded you to look. Semantics." But he smiled. "My dangerous linguist. Your dangerous linguist who's 3 weeks behind on her dissertation." "About that." He pulled away, retrieved something from the desk. She took the envelope, suspicious. Inside was a letter from Columbia's Linguistics department. An offer to fund her research, full stipend, extended deadline, and a position as visiting scholar in regional American dialectology. Nico, this is what you deserve. I can't give you safety. Can't promise you normal. But I can make sure the work you love doesn't die because you got tangled up with a criminal. Tears stung her eyes. This is too much. It's not enough. He moved closer. You gave up your apartment, your job, your simple life. The least I can do is make sure you can still do the work that matters. She set the letter down, threw her arms around him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The position requires you to document native speakers for the university archive. He held her tight. And I'm volunteering. Me, Santina, Uncle Rocco, everyone in the family who still speaks old Brooklyn Italian. We'll be your informants. The brilliant audacity of it made her laugh. You're giving me access to the Brooklyn Mafia for academic research. I'm preserving my grandfather's language while giving my girlfriend a career and keeping you close, because the idea of you going back to coffee shops and being vulnerable makes me violent. Your girlfriend. Unless you prefer the woman I'm dangerously in love with. Her heart stopped, started again faster. You love me. Chu karu asai doloki mei. He cupped her face in both hands. More precious than my eyes. More necessary than breathing. You walked into my world and made me want to be better than what I inherited. Nico, I'm not good enough for you. I know that. I'll do terrible things, make choices you'll hate. But I will spend every day trying to be someone worthy of your faith in me. She kissed him, tasting snow and promises and the dangerous possibility of building something new from inherited ruins. I love you too, you terrifying, complicated, beautiful disaster of a man. He laughed, surprised and joyful. We're both disasters. Then we'll be disasters together. The meeting with Costa happened 3 days later. Alessia wasn't there. Nico had drawn that line firmly. But she waited in the penthouse, pretending to work on her dissertation while her stomach twisted with anxiety. When he finally came home at midnight, she searched his face for blood or bruises or signs of violence. Instead, she found exhausted triumph. We have a deal. He collapsed onto the sofa. Territory split, shared medicine roots, peace for at least a year. You did it. We did it. He pulled her against him. Costa asked about you, actually. Should I be worried? He wanted to know if the woman who spoke old Brooklyn was real, or if I'd imagined her. Nico's smile was sharp. I told him you were very real and very off-limits. What did he say? That any woman brave enough to get involved with me deserved combat pay. He kissed her temple. He's not wrong. She settled into his embrace, listening to his heartbeat slow from battle-ready to something approaching peace. What happens now? Now I try to build what my grandfather couldn't. A family business that's more than just survival. That uses what we are to help people. The medicine routes, community programs, protection for people the system fails, using the network for good when we can. It's ambitious. It's probably impossible. He tightened his hold on her. But you make me believe in impossible things. Like what? Like redemption. Like building something worth inheriting. He paused. Like love surviving in a world made of violence. She turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability he only showed her. Love doesn't just survive violence, Nico. Sometimes it transforms it. Is that what we're doing? Transforming. We're trying. That's all anyone can do. Later, as they lay tangled in his bed with the city glittering beyond the windows, he spoke into the darkness. Beda. I love you in the old language. Beda, she echoed. Always. 6 months after that night in the warehouse, Alessia stood in a small church in Carroll Gardens, attending the christening of Antonio's new grandson. Not getting married, they both knew that was still years away if ever, but watching the family gather in celebration instead of violence. Look at you, she murmured to Nico as he held the baby with surprising gentleness. Dangerous mafia mediator gone soft. Still dangerous, just more carefully applied. Uncle Rocco approached his expression less hostile than it had been. The Costa deal is holding. Port operations are smooth. Good. Any problems? Nothing we can't handle without bloodshed. Rocco's eyes flicked to Alessia. Your way is working. For now. It was as close to approval as they'd get. As the family gathered for the celebration meal, she watched Nico move among them, still lethal, still commanding, but tempered by something new. Hope, maybe, or the belief that patterns could be broken. He caught her staring, raised his glass in a silent toast. She raised hers back. Ti voglio bene. She mouthed the old Brooklyn phrase. His smile could have lit the city. That night back in the penthouse, she sat at her desk working while Nico read reports on the sofa. Alessia, if you could go back to that night in the cafe, knowing everything that would happen, would you still drop that cup? She looked up, met his eyes across the room. Yes, every time. Even knowing the danger, the violence, everything you'd have to witness. Even then. She set down her pen. Because the alternative is a world where I never knew you. Where your family's language died without being documented. Where you kept trying to be your grandfather instead of yourself. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to her desk, pulled her into his arms. Chukaru assai doloki me, more precious than my eyes. You saved me. We saved each other. And in the end, maybe that was the truest thing. Two people from different worlds brought together by a dying language and a moment of recognition, building something new from inherited violence, choosing mercy over vengeance, love over fear. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and dangerous and complicated, but it was theirs, and that made it worth every risk. Dig 2 graves before you dig for revenge. Sal Lavaro had once told Gianna Falcone after she'd killed a man who'd tried to destroy an innocent girl. The old saying meant that vengeance consumed both the hunter and the hunted, that violence fed on itself until nothing remained but ash and regret. But there was another way to read it. That sometimes you dug 2 graves so you could bury the old way alongside the men who'd lived by it. That you could honor the dead by refusing to repeat their mistakes. That language could be a weapon that healed instead of harmed. Alessia had dropped a cup in a cafe and understood 3 words in a language most people thought was dead. Nico had spoken those words and seen someone who looked at him like he was still human. Together they'd built something impossible from that moment, a bridge between worlds that shouldn't have touched a future that honored the past without being enslaved by it. 2 years later, she'd publish her dissertation, The Last Speakers, Preservation and Evolution of Old Brooklyn Italian in Contemporary Urban Communities. The dedication would read, to Gianna Russo and Salvatore Lavaro, whose languages saved lives. But tonight she just held Nico in the penthouse above the city, 2 disasters choosing each other, and whispered the words her grandmother had taught her, the words his grandfather had used to build an empire, the words that had brought them together and might yet transform them both. A lingua è a vera arma. Language is the true weapon.